Everyone's heard of Marco Polo, but just a generation later, one man traveled three times as far. His name was Ibn Battuta, and together we'll turn the pages of the book based on his own words. Episode 1.
Delhi was 50 days away. A letter about me reached it in 5. I was still camped by the Indus, but a messenger had already carried my description ahead of me. In 5 days, Delhi would know what I wore, how many men, slaves, and animals I had with me, how much money I spent, and how I behaved on the road. I thought I was just about to enter Hind, but Hind had already entered me into its records. My name is Ibn Battuta. 8 years ago, I left Tangier alone. My father and mother were still alive. The parting was hard, but the road proved stronger. Since then, deserts, seas, strange cities, and palaces had lain between me and home. Now India lay ahead, the land of Sultan Muhammad Shah. Two things were said of him. He had a special love for foreigners, and he showered them with gifts like no other ruler. That was enough for me to keep going. But first, I had to reach the border. Kabul, once a great city, now seemed little more than a village. Beyond it began the mountains and passes held by Afghan tribes. Their strength wasn't in walls or in a large army. They knew every slope, every pass, every place where a caravan had to slow down. From Kabul, the road led us to the fortress of Kermash, wedged between two mountains. Afghans lived there, living by banditry. They took the slope above the road. From up there, you could see the whole caravan, every horse, every bundle, every man who fell behind. We saw them before they could descend. Bows came up almost as one. We loosed arrows up the slope. The Afghans fell back. The attack ended quickly, but the road wasn't done with me. Our caravan had about 4,000 horses. I was also carrying camels. Because of them, my men fell behind the main column. The dust ahead grew thinner. The voices of the caravan faded. Nothing remained but stones, the heavy breathing of animals, and the mountains where the bandits had just vanished. To move faster, we dumped some supplies. We unloaded the tired camels and left the packs right on the road. Every abandoned bundle meant water, food, or something that seemed essential just that morning. Now only one thing was essential: to catch the caravan before dark. We caught up after the last evening prayer. The next day, men went back for the abandoned loads and brought them. But I remembered something else. Once you fall behind a large column, the thousands of horses ahead can do nothing for you. Then came the desert, 15 days with no settlements. You could only cross it at certain times, after the rains in Sindh and India. In other months, a poisonous wind blew. They said it rotted a body so fast after death that the limbs fell apart. A large caravan had crossed before us. It lost many camels and horses. Our animals walked with heads low. At night, people checked their waterskins more often than their weapons. In the morning, each man looked to see if his neighbor had risen. We made it. Not because the desert was kind. We simply didn't stop. Every morning, the drivers got the animals up before the heat. By midday, cloth stuck to skin. In the evening, men silently checked the camel's legs and counted waterskins. In the desert, no attack was needed. Let water run out before the road ends, and the air itself becomes your enemy. At the end of the month of Dhu al-Hijjah, water appeared ahead. The night we arrived, the new moon of Muharram in the year 734 rose over the river. The 12th of September, 1333. Before us lay the Indus, one of the world's great rivers. It was tied to the name Punjab, 5 waters, 5 rivers that feed this land. In the hot season, the river overflowed its banks. When the waters receded, people sowed the damp soil it left behind, much like the farmers of Egypt after the Nile's flood. On one bank, the road I had traveled came to an end. On the other, the domains of the Sultan of India began. I expected to see border guards. Instead, people came to me with paper. First, they looked me over, then my companions. They counted servants, slaves, and pack animals, noted my clothing, wrote down how we moved, how we rested, and how much we spent. They didn't ask who my ancestors were. Here, a stranger was judged by what could be seen and recorded. One scribe held a sheet, another asked questions, a third inspected the animals. They didn't only record what could be counted, how a man carries himself on the road, whether he spends money generously, how he treats those traveling with him, what he does at rest stops, what his character seems to be. In a country where no one knew my lineage or my forebears, the pen had to determine my worth. I watched the pen move across the line and understood. Without yet meeting the Sultan, I had already become a dispatch. One message was sent to the governor of Multan. Another was to go farther, to Delhi. From the Indus to the capital was a 50-day journey. The letter covered that distance in 5. I asked how that was possible. They showed me the road along which news travels. The postal system here was of 2 kinds. The Sultan's horses were stationed every 4 miles, but foot runners moved even faster. Every mile was divided into 3 parts. At the end of each third stood a village. Beyond it, 3 tents. In each tent waited runners with whips 2 cubits long. Copper bells jingled at the top. The runner held the letter clutched in his fingers. The bells rang before he came into view. The next man heard the sound, stood up, and prepared. The first handed over the letter. The second was already running onward. No pause, no conversation. Only the jingle, the handoff, and the next third of a mile. That's how the Sultan received rare fruits from Khorasan before they could spoil. That's how they brought him water from the Ganges when he was far from the river. That's how especially dangerous prisoners were moved. A man was placed in a chair, and runners carried it on their heads from station to station. I pictured that route. One man runs until he's gasping for breath, hands off the letter. Another picks it up without asking a single question. Then a third. Hundreds of hands. One message. And none of the runners knows the person whose fate they carry between their fingers. Just as fast, a stranger's name was carried to court. My body would reach the capital in 50 days. My clothes, expenses, and habits would get there in 5. For the first time in my life, the road had gone ahead without me. They explained one more rule. When a foreigner arrived in Multan, he could be held there until an order came from Delhi, whether to allow him to appear at court and how to treat him. A man could cross mountains, deserts, and rivers, could bring scores of horses, could name the rulers he had stayed with, but the final leg of the journey was decided by a sheet of paper that came from the capital. Until the answer arrived, the traveler waited. His caravan ate. The animals demanded feed. Merchants counted the days. And somewhere in Delhi, people who had never seen him decided whether he was worthy to approach the Sultan. The Sultan was especially partial to outsiders. Among his viziers, judges, chamberlains, and in-laws, there were so many foreigners that he ordered them to be given a special honorary title, the nobles. For a man with no known lineage in India, that title was worth more than gold. A foreigner could rise higher than a local noble. But how high was decided by the Sultan, and the higher he raised someone, the farther they had to fall. Every newcomer had to bring a gift. Only then could they hope for a favor in return. Local merchants had long turned this custom into a business. They'd give a traveler thousands of dinars, buy horses for him, camels, slaves, cloth, and other goods. When they stood before the Sultan, the merchants flanked the debtor almost like his own servants. The merchants weren't betting on me. They were betting on the Sultan's character. They knew an expensive gift usually brought back an even more expensive reward. If the ruler smiled, the debtor would pay them back, and the merchant would get rich. If he held back his hand, the foreigner would end up with a beautiful caravan that belonged entirely to someone else. In Ghazni, I bought about 30 horses from an Iraqi merchant from Tikrit, Mohammed ad-Duri. He also sold me a camel loaded with arrows. Arrows were considered a suitable gift for the Sultan, too. Now, arriving in Sindh, I followed the local custom and took more horses, camels, slaves, and anything else that could increase my tribute from other traders. Behind me, a caravan of borrowed wealth was already moving. Every handsome horse raised the value of the gift, and the debt that would one day come due. I hadn't met the Sultan yet, hadn't heard his voice, didn't know if he'd look at my gifts with pleasure or indifference, but I was already living on his future generosity. My horses ate real fodder, the servants ate real food, the merchants handed over real goods, and everything was to be paid for by something that hadn't happened yet. It was like a bridge built entirely from promissory notes. To walk across it, you had to believe the other side existed. That morning we began crossing the Indus. The water was wide and heavy. Beyond it lay Hind. I stepped onto the far bank and felt damp earth under my feet. No gold, no palaces, just reeds. The path ran through marshland, straight between the thickets. The stalks rose higher than a man, hiding everything just a few steps away. First I heard movement, not a quick run, a heavy crackling. The reeds parted. A black beast with a massive head appeared before us. It was smaller than an elephant, but its head seemed bizarrely heavy. Between its eyes rose a single horn, long and thick, a rhinoceros. Here they called it a carcadon. They said of it, a head without a body. The beast stopped. We stopped. One rider decided to attack. He spurred his horse forward. The rhino didn't run, didn't roar. It met the horse with a single toss of its head. The horn drove into the animal's thigh and punched right through. The horse went down, taking the rider with it. The rhino turned and vanished into the reeds before anyone could surround it. We didn't catch it. I stared at the trampled stalks where it had disappeared. Later, after the afternoon prayer, we saw another rhinoceros. It was calmly eating plants. This time the men approached more carefully. The beast lifted its head, turned, and ran. After the first attack, I felt sure the whole marsh was hiding monsters. After the second, I understood. A monster doesn't always come looking for you. Sometimes you're the one charging at it with a raised spear. The rider wanted to show courage. The beast simply answered. The first creature of Hind that met us after the crossing wasn't chasing the caravan. It was attacked first. I ran my hand along my horse's neck. The animal was trembling. There were still 50 days ahead to Delhi, but the letter about me was already racing to the Sultan faster than my horse could run. The merchants were already counting my debt, and the reeds had already shown how quickly one wrong step can throw a rider and his horse. I thought I had entered India the moment I crossed the river. But the border wasn't a line on the water. It was made of three things: a letter that outpaced me, a debt that followed behind, and a road where every mistake became visible at once. No, first they wrote me down, then they lent me future gold, and only then did they allow me to set foot on the other shore. In this land, danger didn't always come with a drawn sword. Sometimes it came with a pen. Sometimes with a bag of coins. Sometimes it stood silent in the reeds, waiting to see who would charge first. We continued on. The road went east. Around the bend people appeared, walking toward us. They moved slowly. An old man under a bundle of rags, a woman with a child, thin boys clinging to her clothes. They were leaving the place I was heading for. I pulled on the reins, and prepared to ask what awaited me ahead.